in my head and in my heart and on my lips, that I may know you and love you and to speak only your truth. Amen. So if you've ever watched the TV show Alone, one of my guilty pleasures, where survivalists go out into the woods to live on their own, to try and outlast the others in a game of endurance and bushcraft, and let's be honest, just starvation. It is likely, if you've watched the show, that you've heard a contestant or two extol the virtues of plants that they can forage for food and herbal remedies, because meat is hard to find in the wild. One such plant, plantain, no, not the cousin of the common banana, but a small broadleaf weed that grows close to the ground, is often celebrated by contestants when found. One contestant in Patagonia, in South America, used a plantain poultice to treat a potentially deadly recluse spider bite and fought off infection with it, or so she argued. Another contestant in British Columbia along the Pacific coast found abundant plantain on a grassy estuary near her stream and near her shelter, which she believed helped her keep her symptoms of MS at bay, and which also fed her abundantly in particularly lean times, allowing her to outlast most of her competitors. Now, you've undoubtedly encountered plantain. If you've weeded a garden or a yard, or like me this morning, walked out to the sidewalk of the church and found it growing right alongside the sidewalk. I'm going to put those down because while edible, we have lots of dogs in this neighborhood. It took to 45 to have my wife explain to me, you can't forage on dog walking paths. I'm slow to learn, sorry. You've undoubtedly encountered it because it grows almost everywhere alongside trails and roads and sidewalks and parks. It is a ubiquitous plant that thrives in disturbed soils. And you might believe it to be a native species considering how prevalent it is, but plantain is an immigrant. It's a non-native plant to the Americas. Yet it is not, in botanist speak, invasive. In fact, because of its beneficial properties, thriving in places that are often trampled, its roots breaking up compacted soils and simultaneously preventing erosion, as well as its ability to coexist alongside native species without disrupting the ecosystem, botanists have dubbed plantain a naturalized plant, an immigrant that has integrated into the landscape and environment where it has taken root. I've been thinking about plantain a little bit this week as I prepared for this Sunday sermon, in part because I was lucky enough, at the behest of Stephen and Stephanie, parishioners of ours who sit on the board of Milkweed, to be invited to their table at Milkweed Publishing's annual gala event this weekend, where we got to hear Robin Wall Kimmerer speak. Kimmerer uses plantain as an example of what it means to live by indigenous principles when one is foreign to a place, not indigenous to it. Indigeneity is a birthright, she notes, but we can all become naturalized like the plantain to the lands that we have come to call home. She writes in her now famous book, Braiding Sweetgrass, being naturalized to place means to live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink, that build your body and fill your spirit. To become naturalized is to know that your ancestors lie in this ground. Here you will give your gifts and meet your responsibilities. To become naturalized is to live as if your children's future matters. To take care of the land as if our lives and the lives of all our relatives depend on it. Because they do. This has not always been the posture of the majority of us who are not indigenous to these lands. We have lived, as Kimmerer notes, as if one of our feet is on the land and one is still on the ships that brought us or our ancestors, unsure if we will stay. As such, we have not always behaved in ways that sought the longevity and care of this place or its original inhabitants, the plants and animals, or the soils and waters, the air and the people who are indigenous to these shores. We have not become fully naturalized to the landscape in ways that are mutually beneficial and reciprocal. There is an echo this morning of Kimmerer's call to naturalization in the words of the prophet Jeremiah. He exhorts people in exile in Babylon. He says, "Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease." In short, he says, seek the welfare of the city. Seek the welfare of the places where you have been planted, by choice or not, even where you have been sent into exile. Many, if not most of us, who are not indigenous to this land, perhaps we've never experienced ourselves, or perhaps we've just simply forgotten the stories of our ancestors, what it felt like to be displaced, to have been forced to flee a home, to migrate for survival, or worse still, what it felt like to be kidnapped and brought to a new land, to be rootless and adrift. The pain of these memories and these experiences could be instructive at a minimum. And the memory of them retold and remembered again and again might increase within us, at best, compassion and empathy for the plight of migrants and refugees among us today. Those whose lives now fit into the landscape of our daily existence as beneficial residents, coexisting with us in this place that we too call home. And let's be honest, the data shows that immigrants and migrants are almost universally beneficial to the places where they have made their home. In the gospel this morning, we hear yet another story of an immigrant who, when healed by Jesus, returns to Jesus to give thanks for his healing. It is important to note that in Luke's gospel, it is often the foreigner, or especially the Samaritan, a known enemy to Jesus and his contemporaries in his culture and his moment. It is these who are often depicted as demonstrating faithfulness to the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ. There were 10 individuals who were afflicted with a disease, a sloughing off of skin that is described by the gospel writer as leprosy, even though that disease purportedly did not fully exist at that time. So something like it, that made them unclean, that made them outcast from their communities, whose lives were already considered forfeit to death and to decay. 10 were healed. Yet only one returns to Jesus in an act of faithfulness, worship, and gratitude. This one, the outsider, is the foreigner, the Samaritan. In his commentary on this week's gospel, the Reverend Dr. Eric Barreto of Princeton Theological Seminary writes, "It may be that recognizing the experience of the foreigner is essential in proclaiming this text. After all, the experience of the foreigner is unenviable. Familiarity is fleeting for the foreigner. On the one hand, the foreigner's new home is never quite home. Many will dream of returning to the land of their birth, but this first home is a place that no longer really exists. But so, once the foreigner has left home, the home itself changes, but so also does the one who migrates to a new land. Their new home is their true home, though it may never feel that way." This week on NPR, I heard the tragic story, maybe you heard it too, of a family preparing to flee the Gaza Strip. Already displaced twice before, but having been fortunate enough to be able to return home, the family acknowledged that this time was likely the final displacement. As the one being interviewed, the father of the family described the experience of working with his brothers to convince their own father to leave as well. Finally successful, a car was arranged to collect his own father and his father's possessions, at least the ones he was willing to take with him, to leave the family home behind. Before they left, the car's driver, a stranger to them all, encouraged them to pause, to look upon their home, and to take a picture of their home, to remember it before it was lost forever. The pain of that story settled deep in my heart. It troubled me. Have I been so forgetful as to not know the stories of displacement in my own history, in my own body? Again, as Barreto writes, the foreigner understands the sting of oppression. She understands the usually unavailing nostalgia that accompanies exile. She understands the rootlessness that characterizes the foreigner's life. These are all experiences that shaped the story of Israel and its Messiah. Without them, the narrative of God's action in this world is incomplete. Barreto's writing reminds us that the foreigner among us is an integral part of our own community and our own community's identity, especially as people of the Judeo-Christian tradition. As the Torah teaches, you shall not wrong or oppress the resident alien among you, for you were once an alien in Egypt. Even Jesus himself shares the story, bears this story in his body of migration and displacement, fleeing with his parents in his early years into Egypt to escape the threat of oppression and imminent death. We forget these stories to our own spiritual and moral detriment. This morning we are invited anew as people who follow the migrant Jesus, who are inheritors of a story of displacement, slavery, and exile, to remember these stories by telling them to ourselves and to our children. We are invited to let these memories and these stories guide us into acts of compassion and empathy, to resist always the drive towards violence and exclusion. We should be instead driven to empathy to the foreigner living among us. And like those newer to our shores, to make ourselves even more naturalized to the communities and places that we too have come to call home, to seek their welfare, to become those who benefit and bless the land and its inhabitants instead of extracting and exploiting from it. Finally, we are invited this morning by these stories, by these lessons, to take on the habits and practices of gratitude, to shape our lives by the custom of returning and giving thanks, grounding ourselves in our homes and our families and our church in the ways of thanksgiving, so that when we recognize our story in the story of the migrant and the displaced, we can fall at Jesus' feet, knowing that we too have been made whole. Amen.